Well, good morning, everyone. It's Thursday. Can you believe how fast this week is going? I think it's because, for me anyway, I'm enjoying our study through Hebrews chapter 11, the Hall of Faith, so much that I just look forward to each next day. I hope you are also. And today we come to a portion of this chapter that, as far as I'm concerned, includes us. Now, why do I say that? Well, up to this point, the writer to the Hebrews was going through and naming person by person by person who had lived exemplary lives in terms of placing their extreme faith in God. And remember what faith is? Being certain of things not seen, verse 1. Today, we come to a path toward the end of the chapter. And the writer has gone through person after person. The second half of verse 35. Do you see what the first word of that is? Let's read that. Others were tortured and refused to be released so that they might gain a better resurrection. He's going to continue to go on through describing what these others have gone through. And for me, when you use the word others, it's all followers of Christ, all followers of God in Old Testament times, that were living a life of faith. We're going to read through this and see the descriptions that he talks about. But it also includes the present day. There are people, so many people right now, that are living the lives that are described here. Let's start again at verse 35. Others were tortured and refused to be released so that they might gain a better resurrection. Down through history, starting with the first century, there have been people that have been given the choice: denounce Christ or die. That happens today all over the world. In many places of the world, I should say. Not all over the world. Thankfully, not in our country at this point. But they're given that choice. And so many, the vast, vast majority, choose to die for Christ rather than denounce Him, even just with their words. Why? Because, and it says, they'll gain a better resurrection. They'll gain life everlasting. They don't need to worry about this life and death, so they refuse to give in. Remember when we studied briefly Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Hey, throw us into the fire, they said. And if God is more than able to save us, but if He doesn't matter, we're not going to bow down to you. They chose to follow God. Well, that's just the start. Believers have done that down through the ages. They do it today. Verse 36. Some faced jeers and flogging, while still others were chained and put in prison. They were stoned. They were sawed in two. They were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskin and goatskins, destitute and persecuted and mistreated. I love this next line. The world was not worthy of them. They were that great. That great. The world was not worthy of them. Why? They weren't rich and famous or powerful. They were faithful followers of God. That's all. That's what it takes. The world is not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and in holes in the ground. Who does that sound like to you? That's a lot of the world's refugees today. And often Christians are the ones that are thrown out and not honored and have to just scramble for food. They lose their jobs, they lose their livelihoods just for being followers of Christ. Certainly throughout the Muslim world today, that's a common thing, that if you won't denounce your faith in Christ, you end up not having a livelihood or place to live. And family leaves you often also. I just was watching the news before recording this, and the things that are happening in Afghanistan, and I think of, it's going to be terrible for any, especially woman or child, especially girl child, in Afghanistan. Well, we're seeing what's happening there because, at least at the time that I'm recording this, we still have media in there, and we're able to see what's likely to happen. And it's terrible. And that's for the Muslim women. Can you imagine what it was going to be like for Christian women, or actually Christian anybody in Afghanistan at this point? It's very, so we need to be in prayer for our brothers and sisters in Christ there. And other places of persecution. We have to support the persecuted church. I mean, and it does happen. It's happening big time in China at this point in time also, where it's very costly to be a follower of Christ. We've got to support them in any way that we can. But so that's all the hard news. Verse 39 is the good news. All these people that we've been talking about, even right down to today, says they were commended for their faith. They're commended for their faith. That's wonderful, isn't it? And it's true. God is so pleased with those who remain faithful. It's the key thing. That their faith is grounded in hope and certainty in Him. All that they're doing, all the people that He has just described from 2,000 years, well, really, for the time of history, right up to today, to hear those words from Jesus, well done, good and faithful servant. That's why they stay faithful, just to hear that. And that's what God talks about right there in verse 39. They were commended for their faith. That's when they're going to get commended. And yet none of them received what had been promised. Because God, promises that even this life, some of His promises don't get fulfilled. They will all be fulfilled in heaven. And we know that. Verse 40, God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Wow. Friends, the perfect is coming. And it's not our calling that we've been blessed enough to live in this country where the persecution is not like that. That indeed we have fairly easy lives. But there still is rejection sometimes, or criticism, or how could you believe that? Well, our calling is really like the others that are mentioned in verse 35. Others. We are in the others. Now, our calling is twofold. We got to be thankful that we're blessed in living in this environment, that we don't have to give our lives for our faith. But we do in the sense that we dedicate our lives to Christ, and so that's our second calling, is to stay faithful to whatever calling God has given you and me. That's all that God asks for us, that we stay faithful to that. If He has asked us to be in ministry, to minister to others, to be faithful in prayer, or whatever He's laid on your heart, stay faithful to that. And verse 39 will be true for you and me also. We are commended for our faith. Well, we'll get into a little bit more specifics tomorrow. Hope you can join us. See you then. Bye, everyone.